Hey guys, it's winter time here in Ohio. This is when I do a lot of lure building, and I take care of all my rod and reels and stuff. You guys have been seeing that over the past couple of videos. But today we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to modify a do-it mold, and we're not going to do any kind of modification that can't be fixed. I don't like doing that. But I have a do-it mold here. Let me get this hook out here. I'll show it to you. So this is a football jig do-it mold. Get the camera to focus in here on it. So this do-it mold jig, again, model you saw it there, FWB 4M-ASU, which is the assorted sizes football head jig that makes jigs that look similar to this without the powder paint. This is something that I've created here. Football head jig, you do have to cut the sprue off the back of it when it's done. You need a couple of things to build your own jigs. You're going to need either some skirts like this or skirt material that you make your own with. You're going to need some hooks that fit your appropriate mold. So this is a 3/0 mustad hook. I like mustads more than anything, especially in these jigs. They make a heavy duty flipping hook, and I don't know that you guys are going to be able to tell the difference really on this camera, but the wire on these hooks are way thicker than they would be on a regular like Texas rig hook, like an offset shank worm hook or something like that. The issue is that how you use this jig is that there's a little thing that goes in this right here that actually causes a hole to be made in the jig, just like this right here. And that hole right there allows you to put in a fiber weed guard. I have one here. So this is the fiber weed guard I'm talking about. It's just some pieces of plastic. They are glued at the top. Actually, they're melted there at the top. And what you would do is you would take some epoxy and you would epoxy this thing in here, and it would stay in there and cause your jig to be weedless. Well, I personally don't like that big weed guard on there. And I saw a couple other jigs on the market that actually had a wire weed guard on them. So I looked around and I found them on Barlow's Tackle. You can find them on Jan's Netcraft. There's a lot of people that make their own using coated leader wire, which is what I'm going to try to do. But I bought these little pieces of wire. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see that or not, but you guys could see that hopefully. They're just two pieces of wire with a crook bent in the other. So I bought 100 of these things. I think they're fairly cheap on again, Barlow's Tackles, where most of this stuff came from. But I like that style better, and I have one here tied on if I can get it out. But I like that style of jig a little better with the wire hook keeper as opposed to that big bulky fiber. So these actually do the same thing as a standard weed guard, but they're wire. So the issue is how do you get those things to stay in there? Well, my initial thought was so how do you get these things to stay in? Well, my initial thought was to pull the little plug out. And again, I'll show you this little, it's what feels like aluminum, but this gets put into the mold, and I'll show you when I can see it a little better here. Actually, there's some epoxy in this thing right here, so it's not going to hold in there. But normally, this thing is in the head of this jig, just like this, and then you have to take pliers or your fingers and pull this out away from the jig, and that gives you the cavity left there to put the hook or the fiber weed guard in. Again, I want to modify my mount, or I want to modify my mold to allow me to put the wire in there and pour the wire around it, because again, my initial thought was to pull that out of there, fill that with epoxy, drop the wires down in there and let it cure. Although that worked, it is very time consuming and it does a lot. It leaves a lot to be desired. First off, the epoxy will fail. There's not a whole lot of stuff in there for it to grab onto inside that little pocket. Also, getting the wires to stay basically vertical while I had 5-minute epoxy, so it wasn't like I used hours long epoxy, but it still took forever. So doing some research, asking around with people, and I come up with an answer that I think is going to work for me, and that is red silicone permatex. This is Gasket Maker. This stuff actually is high temperature. You definitely want the red. There's a black and I think a gray. The red is high temp. You can see there that, you know, we're talking RTV silicone. Right here you can see high temp. You're going to want something that's high temperature because you're going to be pouring hot molten lead into this thing, and if it's really, this mold will continue to get hot and hot, you know, hotter and hotter and hotter depending on how long you use this thing. So what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to attempt to fill those little plug holes up with RTV silicone, and I'm going to try to get it flat with the top of the mold. So the plane of this mold, I want it to be flat against that. And initially I thought that I should put a couple of the wires in there and let it mold around it, and that's going to be a pain. And the more I read, and they make a very good point that if you know, put metal on top of something, rubber, and squeeze on it, the rubber is going to give way, and it's going to cause that indentation to be the size that you need it to anyway. So having that all flush and basically using those two pieces of RTV rubber to press down on those wires is going to give me an opportunity to seal off the lead on my mold, and it's also going to allow me to, you know, if I don't like this, you know, I can always pull it back out. I could take a razor blade or something and scrape this out of here because it's not going to be permanently in there. So we're going to zoom in here. I'm going to try the smaller jig size here, which is 3/8. That's this jig right here, a 3/8 size jig. But the reason I'm doing a smaller version of it only is because right now the only hooks I have are 3/0 hooks. And I got some more coming in. But the other molds take 4 and 5/0 hooks. The only thing I have right now is a 3/0. So I want to test this for functionality, and we're going to put some RTV in here. I'm going to take my time and get it as flat as possible, and I want to make sure that the RTV silicone stops right where this head, I know you can't see that, it's out of focus, it's focused on my face, but I want to make sure that it stops right on the head of that head there. That way, you know, I want the RTV to stop right there. That way the lead doesn't come out any farther, and it doesn't create an indentation into the head. Right, so we're going to zoom in here. I'm going to, I have some smoke in here in the molds, you can see, and that's due, the reason of that being done that way is so the mold will release the lead that's in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you know, a cotton swab, a Q-tip, and some alcohol, and I'm going to try to clean these spots out here where these plugs normally sit. Again, I'm trying to make these out of RTV basically, but I want them to stop right at the edge of the mold. So let's zoom in here. I'm going to try to clean them up, and I'm going to try to make this 3/8 ounce so I can pour them with the wires, and if that works, I'll do the other ones. So let's get it. We have the molds. Again, I have this 3/8 ounce jig head right here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this thing in the jig head just to make sure that this is right. And sure enough, you can see that it fits right in there. And you know, the thing about this is that these little holes right here, again, I'll show you just so this thing actually fits in here like this, and then you pour the lead in there, and that creates a cavity that you can put those little fiber weed guards in like this. And again, I don't like that. They work great, but I like the wire better. So I'm going to try this. So I'm going to attempt to fill this cavity with some RTV silicone. But you'll notice there's a bunch of smoke and stuff around there, and I want to make sure that I have all that cleaned out. So I'm going to grab some alcohol here, just to have some 90% rubbing alcohol. And then I'm going to try to clean this thing out as much as possible. I want to do the other side too, don't forget it. Another thing that just hit me is that how far down these channels here, how far down these channels am I going to want to make the RTV go? And that kind of comes into the situation of personal preference, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to see where one of these wires actually end up. So again, these are just wire weed guards that I picked up at Barlow's Tackle. You pick these up pretty much anywhere that sells lure parts. But again, these things don't have to be buried a ton in there. but I do want them to be fairly up in there pretty good, so I'm gonna go with somewhere in there. It's about halfway, and if you notice though, that actually, hopefully you guys can see that, the end of it stops right here, which is not very much farther down through there. So I feel like that I'm gonna have to fill up this entire cavity here with RTV, from here to here, all the way down, and we're gonna work our way down. Again, so I'm going to fill up both sides of this, here and here, and that has to be flat with the top. There can't be any kind of extrusion, or it's not going to fold. It's not going to compress properly to pour the actual jig head. So 3/8 is actually here. Don't want to make sure I do the right one. Little flathead screwdriver there. I'm going to try to use this to flatten this off. You're going to need something to wipe the excess off. I'm just going to use a piece of paper here. Be sure when you get to that little thick part there, where the actual head of that other one went in, you don't just dip whatever you're scraping that off with down in there. I'm actually really happy with the way that's looking there. Alright, so I'm fairly happy with that, the way it's working out there. And again, this area right in here is recessed. This face right here actually smashes together and keeps the lead from coming out. So you want to make sure this face and this face is really well cleaned off, and make sure that you have both sides of those cleaned off. That way there's a really nice mating surface for the metal to, have a metal on metal contact. That way no actual lead sprues out of there. So now what's going to happen is, when this dries, I'm going to be able to take, I'll use this one that's got some silicone on it here, but you're going to be able to take this, this wire weed guard, and I should be able to just lay them on top of this silicone wherever I want it, shut the mold, pour the lead in there, and that'll keep it from the sprue coming out. It'll also keep this thing in place because you're going to have that rubber pressing against it. 24 hours later, we're going to come back. I'm going to pour one of these 3/8 ounce jigs, and we're going to see what happens. It should work just like I planned. 24 hours later, we have some dried RTV silicone in the mold there. I went ahead and done all the slots there except for the smallest one, because I'm never going to pour that jig pretty much anyway. If I do, it'll be a finesse jig, and I'll worry about that as it goes on. Let's zoom in. I'm going to load this 3/8 ounce jig up, and I'll go out and pour a couple. I'll show you the end result. And then now, it's going to come the hard part, is getting these wire weed guards here to stay in that cavity where I poured the RTV silicone. So you're going to need 2 of these, and it's going to take a little bit of doing, I think. It's going to be kind of tedious here, I hope not. But I'm going to grab these things, and I'm going to lay them in here. They have to be in that little cavity, and they also have to be up in there where they're going to actually get poured into the lead. And again, I thought that this would be kind of tricky because the RTV is going to be kind of sticky, but that's okay. If I can get this to work this way, I'll take it, as opposed to having to put in the work and effort. So there it is. It doesn't matter where they're at back here, because you have this little cutout that's around here that's going to allow that stuff to close, and that's for the hook to actually clear. I'm going to very carefully close this up, and then again I'm going to go outside in the garage. I'm going to pour a couple of these things up. I'm going to come back and show you the final product. I went out to the garage, poured a couple of these things up, and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. I'm glad I found this technique. Again, this is not my idea, guys. I found this on a forum somewhere, using RTV silicone to plug up holes on a do-up mold. That way, in case you don't want to do it, or it's just something you want to do every now and again, you can just scrape it back out and put it back in anytime you want. I did powder paint a couple of these things, and for a couple of minutes and like $5 worth of RTV silicone, you can see. So this thing, obviously, you'll take these things and you'll spread these things out, these wire weed guards. And then you'll get them where you want them. You can bend them, rebend them, whatever you want to do. And then there they are. You can see them coming up there like a pair of antenna. I'm gonna throw a skirt on one here. Take a look at what it looks like with the skirt on it. It does have a bait keeper here, which is going to be kind of tough to get the trailer up or the skirt up on. I thought it would be. Actually, it wasn't too bad. No, you guys can't see this. Apologize. I'm just putting this skirt up on here. Went up over the little bait keeper really easily. Then up on the little barb for the skirt. I will eventually hand tie these. But for right now, for this demonstration purposes, works really well. So there it is. A full jig made with the Do It Mold football jig that's been modified for the wire weed guards, as you see there. Turned out really well. Really well, in my opinion. So, again, probably want to cut some of this jig skirt off. You know, usually cut it just below the hook, usually what I do. But for the sake of this video, guys, that's all I have for you today. Again, a little RTV silicone gasket maker here. This is just permatex gasket maker. Make sure you get high temp. You can put it in any of the cavities that you want to basically fill up on a Do It mold. And it'll allow you to have multiple molds for or multiple applications for the same mold. So I could easily scrape that RTV out of there and put the actual fiber weed guards in there if I wanted to. But I am very, very happy with the way it turned out, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of On Another Line. If you did, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're notified when I post new content. And hopefully, I'll see you guys out on the water very soon. If you guys can, get out there and lean on them. We'll see you next time on Another Line.